Hello everybody, I'm Yao Lu. It is an honor to be here and share my research with you today. The topic of this presentation is Shanshui, between heaven and earth, text, sound and spirit of Echoes from the Gorge by Chou Wen-chung. Here, Shanshui refers to traditional Chinese landscape painting of mountains and waters. Echoes from the Gorge was completed in 1989. It is held as one of the best percussion pieces of the 20th century. In this piece, there are 36 kinds of percussion instruments. The performance of this piece often lasts about 20 minutes. It consists of prelude and 12 episodes associated with the natural imagery of mountains and waters, like a sonic version of a set of vivid Chinese landscape painting, Shanshui. This research starts with the auditory perception of this work by listening the recordings. Indeed, the piece gives me a very strong impression with its variety of rich sounds, especially when the timbre of specific instruments respond to each other in the space. This phenomenon is very special for me. Therefore, it makes me believe that it could be an important factor to understand the work. Now I want to send my sincere gratitude to UC San Diego, Professor Steve Schick, Professor Lei Liang, Redfish and Bluefish, and all the percussionists I met in UCSD. Because of them, I got fortunate to hear the live performance and rehearsal of the Echoes from the Gorge in 2019's Chou Wen-chung Memorial Concert. The concert program and the photos of the performance are shown here. And at the same time, I understanding how stage arrangements of instruments could affect the spatial sound experience of this work. And it certainly encouraged me to keep working on the research, because it indeed confirmed my hypothesis from the earlier stage recording listening. Therefore, my subsequent analysis for this piece, involving the placement of instruments, is based on this specific concert version. For me, the response and echo of sound in space is crucial for this work. This statement based upon at least two reasons. The first is the continuously generative relationship of musical materials, and the second is the meaningful spatial layout of instruments and their timbre organizations. At the same time, there is a spirit behind that Mr. Chou has a thorough understanding of. There, in Chinese culture, Tao gives birth or produce to all things, and the spatial awareness in Chinese landscape painting. My presentation will start with the title, Echoes from the Gorge. In Chinese version, it is very concise, with only two characters. The first one, gu, means gorge. The second one, yin, means echoes. We know that Chinese characters are pictographies. We can see many stimulating imageries with it, especially in the traditional Chinese characters. In ancient oracle bone script, golden script, and seal script, the gorge is divided into two parts. The upper part is a double fold line with the imagery of water in it, while the lower part represents a mountain pass which can also be regarded as a spring. We can imagine that water just flows out of the spring. So the word gu, gorge, itself is in the context of Shanshui or landscape. It is first and foremost a space related to mountains and waters. That is the tangible side of it, and it also has a higher dimension, an intangible, transcendental side. Gu is a very important concept in Chinese culture. It symbolizes a good character and a spiritual state. In the Tao and Te by Lao Tzu, it is mentioned many times. For example, in chapter 15, genuine like a piece of undressed wood, open-minded like a gorge, or in chapter 41, superior virtue appears like a gorge. So the gorge, among nature, is a place of emptiness and peace between mountains, with flowing water and life nourished by it. It is an imagery of change that arises, nurtures, and grows out of the unchanging. It is also an imagery of emptiness, and this emptiness is the bearer of all things. Then let's look at echoes. It responds to yin. On a tangible level, an echo is a projection of sound that occurs when a sound wave hits a large reflective surface during propagation. What about an intangible level? Let's look at the seal script, which is very compelling. The first half of the seal script, the first half of it is a distortion of the word geese, which means that geese, as we know, can consciously cooperate with each other when they are migrating in a flying formation. The second half of the character is heart, meaning intention. So the whole character indicates that the mind is connected like the geese. Therefore, as a verb, the original meaning is to have the resonance of being connected to each other, to be able to cooperate and influence each other tacitly. It's like a kind of telepathy. In Chinese culture, there is a special emphasis on telepathy. There is a saying in the Qian trigram of the I Ching, the Book of Change, which means act in unison, like acts like. This telepathy may occur between animals, such as the geese just mentioned, and between humans, but also between nature and humans. That is the interaction between heaven and mankind. This kind of telepathy or resonance is instantaneous, without logical analysis, beyond the tangible and the distance. So the things between heaven and earth in this dynamic process form a unified whole of universal connection. All in all, the title has given abundant information for us. There are several layers related to emptiness and reality. We can also call it yin and yang for Gu Gorge. From the perspective of reality, it is tangible, but at the same time, it is characterized by emptiness, carrying natural objects in the void. For echoes, from the perspective of reality, it is audible. Also, at the same time, on the level of emptiness, it symbolizes a telepathic relationship between different objects and imagery. Finally, the two characters, Gorge and Echoes, are also a pair of yin and yang, because Gorge is static, yin, and Echoes is dynamic, yang. And the English title The echoes are born from gorge. That is the dynamic one born from the static one. So the gorge is the space which carries the potential of sound, and the echoes is a dynamic momentary, a presentation of sound possibilities in this space. Specific in the work, our observation could also be made from two perspectives, the gorge and the echoes, respectively. The 12 episodes are related to nature and their layout is a gorge of imagery. The picture on the left shows their titles, because the title of each one is a set of imagery related to Shanshui landscape, so each one contrasts an aspect of the natural space. For example, raindrops on bamboo leaves, autumn pond, clear moon, etc. And they are not only tangible but also carry intangible artistic moods and spiritual pursuits. So they all come from two important ancient Chinese works related to the aesthetic of Guqin, which is the classic Xishan works of Qin and the 16 methods of Qin sound. In these writings, the aesthetic mood of the Guqin is described through analogies with natural objects. Finally, the imagery has a dynamic shift between different perspectives of distance, proximity, depth, and height. At the same time, I called instrument layout of the piece the Gorge of Timbre. There is the combination of at least three parameters provide the gorge rich possibilities of timbre. Finally, the 36 kinds of percussion instruments are made of different materials, mainly wood, metal, and skin. According to Chou's classification, I have listed them in this table. Secondly, use different drumsticks, normal bitter, wool, felt, medium hard felt, totally 26 types. Finally, the percussion is struck in different positions. At the same time, these timbres are assigned to 4 players, which reveal many spatial possibilities in terms of the pitch space and the placement of the instruments. For example, 4 claves are sorted by 4 heights from lowest to highest, and they form an inverted zigzag in space. Adding the pitch dimension, it forms such a 3-dimension space. And throughout the work, each type of instrument that can cause echoes forms a different spatial relationships. Here the bell and the sizzle symbol. So in the relatively static gorge of imagery and timbre, there lurk various possibilities of sound that can be echoed by each other, and these possibilities will be activated in the actual musical performance. Let's turn next to the echoes. How is sound and echoes activated in this space? I want to talk about it in 3 main points. First, the time rhythm level of the echoes. The time of the whole work is generated from one sound, the first sound of the whole piece, and it is generated in the pattern of 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, 3 begets all things. This is the prelude. 4 performers appear one by one. The first note is dotted half note, which is 3 beats. The low gong is played by player 2, playing the central position with normal beater. How does 1 begets 2? In the perspective of time, the second and third notes are half and quarter notes respectively. Then the 3 beats are divided to 2 and 1. In the perspective of timbre, the last 2 notes are still played on the same instruments, but the half note, the R-B, in the little circle represents the back edge near of logo, and the MSY in the little box represents the stroke with a medium soft yarn. For the final quarter note, the same medium soft yarn is used, but the position turned to NR, meaning near rim. They grow from the first note. Their timing and the timbre are also related to, but subtly different from the first note. By looking at the first sound as a whole, we get a relationship like this. 1 begets 2. How could 2 beget 3? The 3 notes makes up the first bar, which adds up to 6. Think of the first measure as a whole. Then look at the blue quarter note on the left, which gives rise to 4 plus 2, made up of 2 even numbers, which happens to be the second measure. Look at the red quarter note on the right, which gives rise to 1 plus 5, made up of 2 odd numbers, which happens to be the third measure. How can 3 beget all things? The rhythm within these 3 circles, each as a whole, are transformed into such a set of relationships through retrograde reductive and retrograde reduction. What is listed on this diagram are all the rhythmic patterns in the prelude, and all the rhythmic patterns of the whole work originate from them. They appear in different proportions, timbres, and combinations through metamorphosis. So it's a huge network, and the origin of all the rhythmic patterns is the first one. Because they are so closely related, they all correspond to each other essentially. The same essence keeps giving birth to variants and echoing itself. Then we look at the echoes of space. Here I would like to firstly introduce a significant and a unique spatial concept of Chinese landscape painting theory, the 3 distances. In Lin Quan Gao Zhao, written by Gorge in Song Dynasty, there is an important work of aesthetic ideology in Chinese landscape painting. It is that there are 3 distances when we fixed gaze at mountains. From the bottom of the mountain to look up to the top of it is called high distance. From the front of the mountain to see the back of it is called deep distance. From the near mountain and look at the distant mountains is called horizontal distance. We can find the 3 spatial concepts in this piece. They come from the change in height of the vertical space due to the different pitches of the percussion instruments themselves, the variation in depth between near and far due to changes in accents, rests, intensity, and overtones, and surrounding variations due to the orientation and layout of the instruments. Due to time constraints, I would like to take the first episode, Raindrops on Bamboo Leaves, as an example to talk about the high distance. deep distance and horizontal distance. This episode is divided into 7 sections. It shows central symmetry due to acceleration, deceleration, and the rise and fall of the pitch. We can see the dominant duration of the 7 sections from 144 acceleration to 540, and the tempo change of the 4th section is very steep. The next is the pattern of attacks, which starts with a long rest at a uniform and relatively loose tempo, then becomes alternating with different durations and forms a very dense gesture. This staggering gesture also brings the music into a high tension. Finally, the timbre organization. On this table, I have used 7 colors and numbers to indicate the timbre variations of the 7 sections. The blue and green referring to the first 2 sections. The timbre starts with string instruments and the relatively middle register, including congas and bongos. The third sections, indicated by the earthy yellow color, shifts from string to wood instruments, mainly appearing as clave and wooden fish. Their timbre is dry and brittle. The clave in particular has a high register. In the 4th section, indicated by pink, shifts from wood to metal instruments, mainly cowbell and fingerbell, especially the latter with a very clear, very high penetrating timbre and a fast tinkling frequency of attack, which steeply bring the music into an upward, more tense momentum. Gorge said that the gesture of high distance is abrupt. The abruptness is the sudden contrast of steepness, which is the psychological experience of the viewer in the mountain, just like the sudden change of the gesture of music. He also said the color of high distance is clear and bright, meaning that the ultimate essence of the mountain's high distance is the high and distance of the sky, which precisely corresponds to the kind of clear and bright color of the metal instruments. So from section 1 to 4, the register from middle to very high, the tempo from low to fast, and the timbre tends to clear and bright indicate the artistic mode of high distance. The section 4 to 7 indicate a deep distance. First, the dominant duration gradually fell from 540 to 144. The last 2 sections not only reproduce the previous rhythm, but also fold in a new rhythm, so that the duration is doubled and the sound is brought into a larger space. In terms of timbre and pitch, the large metal instruments are used after the central section. In the last section, indicated in dark purple, which is here, shows the cymbals and gongs. The latter is the lowest register metal instruments of this piece. These designs inspire 4 timbral and special characteristics related to depth. The first is the overlap. The 4 instruments, close in timbre but with different pitch, contact locations in sticks, overlap in timbre when they appear vertically, giving depth to the perception of space. Its dominant timbre is dull and obscure, non-harmonic overtones are long and rich. This blurred the reverberation which makes the space deeper. Subsequently, when the symbol appears, the reverb of the gong is actually still present. So again, a horizontal overlap of timbres and a blend of intensity and lightness is created. Fourthly, an instrument rich in overtones will resonate significantly with other instruments that have not been struck. Uh, this like 10-10, this will further cause a far-reaching perception of space. Gorge said that the color of deep distance is heavy and obscure. The implication of it is overlapped, and the momentum of overlapping will underline the obscure colors, pushing them layer by layer to the deepest and most distant places. So here the sound advances continuously from near to far, reaching a deeper and profound spatial perception. Lastly, look at the horizontal distance. The timbre and rhythm within the 7 sections of the first episode are relatively fixed. In the first section, for example, all 4 players play drums in a rhythmic pattern. Player 1 and 3, player 2 and 4 are retrograde to each other. These 4 drums have different pitches and are distributed in 4 spatial locations. If we organize them according to the actual listening order, we will get a diagram like this. The Arabic numeral 1, 2, 3, 4 indicates the pitch from high to low. The Roman numeral indicates the spatial distribution. Within the 5 bars, they touch on all 4 pitch is and distributions, space possibilities. 6 in total, forming the square in this diagram below, with the 4 blue dots being the pitch and the position occupied by each of the 4 drums, forming a slightly tilted shape with the highest point at player 1. Also, there are unpredictable accent marks that clearly outline and distribution space and the movement of the pitches and tones. Attention should also be paid to crescendos and diminuendos. They further causing the sound to ebb and flow. So the sounds are constantly surrounding and echoing each other in the space. For another example, in a similar way, the third section becomes an alternation of 2 kinds of spaces. While the central raindrops on bamboo leaves, the section 4 has the most abundant spatial echoes and changes, as this diagram shows. Gorge said that the color of horizontal distance is brightness, dark, and gloomy. The implication of it is syncretic and dimly discernible. It means that the aura of it is obtained by the diffuse imagery, subtle changes and balance of bright and dark, intensity and lightness. Of course, drawing the sound trajectory as a diagram seems to be somewhat solidified, and actual sonority features the just rapidly flows. What the hearing receives is the sound constantly reflecting, recalling, projecting, echoing, and forming the state of surrounding and diffusing, thus responding to the spatial consciousness of horizontal distance. High distance, deep distance, and horizontal distance constitute a kind of spatial system similar to a 3-dimensional coordinate system. All 3 fall on distance. It refers to the duration in time and vastness in space. We see the rhythmic material of the piece, which has the characteristics of one begets two, then three, and more, which is in essence a kind of duration of time, and its changes in different dimensions of height, distance, and horizontal present a rich spatial experience and expression. Therefore, in this carry of the gorge, the echoes are activated and presented as a kind of time and space perception. And in a large picture, they echo not only the exploration of space in modern contemporary Western music, but also respond to the Chinese culture. Tao gives birth to all things and the unique spatial consciousness of traditional Chinese landscape painting, Shanshui. Thanks for listening.